The first time I heard my own voice make a room full of millionaires clap, it was coming from a product my girlfriend told the world I had nothing to do with. That was the part nobody warned me about. Not the stage lights, not the cameras, not the way Clara Voss stood in a white suit I had steamed that morning, because she said her hands were shaking too badly to do it herself. Not even Julian Mercer, standing beside her, with his palm resting lightly against her back, as if he had earned the right to guide her through a future built from my sleepless nights. It was the sound. My sound. My breath between sentences. The small drop in tone I used when I wanted someone to feel safe. The pause I had recorded at 3 in the morning, because Clara once said silence could feel like a hand on someone's shoulder if you placed it correctly. All of it poured through the speakers inside Mercer Hall, while I stood near the sound booth wearing a black contractor shirt and a plastic badge that said, "Temporary support." Temporary. That word sat on my chest like a joke written by someone cruel. Above me, a 40-foot screen displayed the product name in clean white letters. LUMA. An AI companion built for people who felt alone. An AI companion that spoke with my voice. The hall was packed with investors, journalists, founders, lawyers, and rich people who looked like they had never carried anything heavier than disappointment. The first 3 rows belonged to people who could decide the future of a company before lunch and still complain about the coffee afterward. Julian Mercer held the microphone with the relaxed confidence of a man who had been born near applause. "Today," he said, "we are not launching another chatbot. We are launching a presence." A soft laugh moved through the room. Presence. 3 years ago, Clara and I had used that word on the floor of my apartment, sitting between empty ramen cups and sticky notes, arguing over whether a machine could comfort someone without pretending to be human. I had said, "It shouldn't replace anyone. It should stay until someone real can arrive." Clara had written it down. Now Julian said it as if it had been born in his mouth. Clara stepped forward. The camera loved her. It always had. She knew exactly where to place her face, so fear looked like sincerity, and ambition looked like courage. LUMA is designed to listen, remember, and respond with emotional continuity, she said. She doesn't just answer, she stays. The audience leaned in. I felt my fingers tighten around the cable in my hand. She stays. That line was mine too. Not legally, I understood that now. Love did not notarize anything. Sleepless nights did not count as a contract. Shared dreams did not hold up in boardrooms. But some sentences still belong to the person who bled into them. Clara lifted a small remote. "LUMA," she said softly, "say hello." The screen pulsed once. For half a second, there was nothing. Then my voice filled the hall. "Hello. I'm here. Take your time." The room went quiet in that way, not because people were confused, but because they were impressed and did not want to ruin their own reaction by breathing too loudly. A woman in the second row covered her mouth. Someone whispered, "That's remarkable." Julian looked pleased. Clara looked relieved. And I stood in the dark with my own voice wrapping around strangers, like it belonged to them. I remembered recording that line. It had been winter. The heat in my apartment had failed again, and I wore 2 hoodies while Clara sat on my bed with her laptop, scrolling through user feedback from our first closed test. One beta tester had written that robotic voices made her feel judged. Another said most assistants sounded like receptionists at a hospital. Clara looked at me and said, "Your voice is different." I had laughed. Different how? like you're not waiting for them to be done. I thought that was love. So I recorded for 6 hours. Hello? I'm here. Take your time. Again. 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 Softer. Warmer. Less tired. More tired. Clara kept asking for one more take, and I kept giving it because when you love someone, you confuse being used with being needed if they say thank you sweetly enough. On stage, Clara smiled as if the room belonged to her. "Luma," she said, "what do you do when someone feels like they have no one?" My voice answered, "I don't tell them they're wrong. I stay with them until the feeling has room to change." A wave of murmurs passed through the hall. That line was mine too, not from a pitch deck. From my mother's kitchen table after my father died, when I was 12, and everyone kept saying she was strong, as if strength was a cure for being left alone with bills and silence. I learned early that people in pain did not need to be corrected. They needed someone who could sit in the room without trying to redecorate the grief. Clara knew that. She knew where the line came from. She used it anyway. A journalist raised her hand. "Clara, Julian, incredible presentation. Can you tell us who developed the voice personality? The emotional timing feels unusually human." Clara smiled. Julian smiled wider. I waited. That was another stupid thing I did that night. I waited for the truth to become convenient. Clara's gaze moved across the room, past the cameras, past the investors, past the sound booth. For one tiny second, her eyes touched mine. There was a question in them. Not guilt. Calculation. Then she turned back to the crowd. "Our team worked extremely hard on LUMA's emotional architecture," she said. Our team. That was the grave where cowards buried names. The journalist nodded. "And the voice model itself?" Julian took the microphone. "The voice came from an early audio contractor," he said with a light laugh. "Talented guy, of course. But the magic is Clara's system. The voice is just the wrapping paper." Wrapping paper. People laughed. Not cruelly. That was worse. Cruel laughter at least knows what it is doing. Polite laughter just follows power around the room and hopes not to be noticed. My badge suddenly felt heavier. Temporary support. Audio contractor. Wrapping paper. Clara did not correct him. She looked down at her notes. That was the moment I understood something I should have understood months earlier. She had not forgotten me. She had edited me. 3 years before Clara Voss called me temporary, she called me home. I met her on the floor of a public library, surrounded by notebooks, a dead laptop, and a coffee she had forgotten to drink. I worked nights at a warehouse then. Boxes, scanners, barcodes, tape. During the day, I learned code from free videos and recorded cheap voice jobs in my apartment because rent did not care about pride. Clara had just been kicked out of a startup incubator after arguing with a mentor who said emotional AI was a soft market with weak monetization. She hated that phrase like it had insulted a child. When her laptop started clicking itself toward death, I should have minded my own business. Instead, I fixed it enough to save her files. She bought me a vending machine coffee with 2 quarters and an apology, then showed me the thing that would ruin us. Back then, LUMA was just a folder named Soft-Room, Final, Real Final. There were no investors, no stage, no Julian Mercer. Just Clara, me, and one question written across the top of her notebook. What should a machine say when a human being admits they are lonely? Most people would have laughed. I did not. I looked at her first response tree and said, "Your fallback answer is too fast." She blinked. What? When a user says, I don't think anyone would notice if I disappeared, your system answers in less than a second. That feels fake. People don't answer that fast unless they are not listening. Clara stared at me, then wrote it down. That was how it started. Not with a kiss, not with a promise, with a delay function. For months, we worked anywhere the Wi-Fi was free. Libraries, diners, subway benches. Once, the laundry room of my building, because the signal from the nail salon downstairs reached the dryers if you sat on the third machine from the left. Clara had the vision. I will not take that from her. She understood loneliness as both a market and a wound. She wanted an assistant that did not rush wounded people toward solutions, just so a product could close the conversation. I built the early memory layer. I wrote the first safety ladder. I recorded placeholder voice lines because her synthetic model sounded like a cheerful elevator. I cleaned transcripts, tested prompts, wrote failure cases, and created what we called the quiet response library. Hundreds of tiny sentences for moments when advice would sound like an insult. I'm still here. We can take the next minute together. You don't have to explain it perfectly. That sounds heavier than you expected. Let's not turn this into a verdict yet. Clara said those lines felt like me. I thought she meant she loved me. Maybe she did at first. The first time she kissed me, it was nearly 5 in the morning. My radiator was clanking like a bad drummer, and my cracked microphone stood between us on a stack of books because my desk had collapsed 2 weeks earlier. We had just fixed a bug that made LUMA repeat. That must be difficult. 7 times in a row like a cursed therapist. Clara laughed until she cried. Then she stopped laughing and looked at me. You make the impossible feel boring, she said. Is that a compliment? It is the best compliment I have. Then she kissed me. After that, the work became our life. Clara moved into my apartment temporarily, which meant her clothes took over the chair, her notes took over the walls, and her dreams took over the air. I did not mind. I liked making room for her. That was my first mistake. Making room is generous. Disappearing inside the room is something else. I paid for server credits when her card declined. I covered groceries when fundraising was close. I skipped a warehouse promotion because the new shift would have meant fewer nights with the model. I sold my camera, then my bike, then the watch my father had left me. Clara cried about the watch more than I did. When this works, she promised, holding my face in both hands, I'll buy it back. I believed her. People always ask why you believed the liar. They never ask how good the liar was at sounding like the future. Julian Mercer appeared at our first investor demo wearing a coat that cost more than my rent and pretending not to notice. That was his special talent. He noticed everything, then acted like noticing was beneath him. LUMA performed well that night. Too well, maybe. An investor asked what it would say to someone who felt he had failed his family, and my voice came through the speakers. Failure is not a place you live. It is a moment that happened. Tell me which part is still hurting. The room changed. People stopped checking their phones. Heads lifted. A few faces softened against their will. Afterward, Clara was surrounded by investors and journalists. I stayed near the back because the laptop battery was at 6%, and the charger only worked if the cable leaned against a bottle at exactly the right angle. That was where Julian found me. You built the response timing? He asked. Some of it. Some? Enough to know when it breaks. He smiled with only one side of his mouth. That is a founder answer, hiding in an employee sentence. I'm not an employee. What are you? I looked at Clara, glowing under attention, like she had been waiting years for the right light. I'm with her, I said. Julian followed my gaze. His smile sharpened. With her, he repeated. That's sweet. 2 weeks later, Mercer Ventures wanted another meeting. Clara started coming home excited, then tired, then distracted, then careful. Careful is when someone edits the truth before they knows what lie they need. She stopped saying we and started saying the company. She stopped asking me to review pitch slides and asked me to clean the voice dataset. She said she was staying at Priya's place because it was closer to the accelerator, but Priya lived 40 minutes farther away. I wanted to trust Clara more than I wanted to ask the question that would make the answer real. So I worked. That is what people like me do when love starts to feel unstable. We become useful enough to mistake usefulness for safety. I recorded more lines. I fixed the memory bug. I built a module that detected shame loops and shifted users gently toward concrete next steps. Clara named it the Mercy Loop. I hated the name. Mercy, when productized, sounded too much like control. Julian loved it. Of course he did. After Julian called my voice wrapping paper, the audience applauded the next demo. They should not have. Not because LUMA failed, because LUMA worked. That was the cruelest part. The product did not betray me. People did. LUMA answered questions with the same careful rhythm I had built line by line. She remembered that a test user named Anna hated being told to breathe because her father used to say that when he wanted her to stop crying. She adjusted language around shame. She waited 2 seconds before responding to grief. She never said, "At least?" I had removed that phrase myself. At least was a knife people handed you and called perspective. The demo moved into live Q&A. Investors asked about retention. Julian answered. A journalist asked about emotional dependency safeguards. Clara answered. Someone asked about voice licensing. Nobody answered for half a second. Then Clara did. All voice assets were properly sourced and transformed through our proprietary emotional rendering process. Properly sourced, transformed. Those words had suits on. They looked official and lied beautifully. A woman in the third row raised her hand. She had silver hair cut just below her jaw, a black blazer, and the kind of stillness that made the people around her seem slightly too loud. I recognized her, but not from anywhere that made sense. She did not look like a reporter. She looked like someone reporters quoted carefully. Evelyn Cross, Crosspoint Capital, she said. A small shift moved through the room. Even I knew that name. Evelyn Cross invested in companies that made impossible things look inevitable. She had bought failing hospitals, funded accessibility tech, rebuilt a speech device company after a scandal, and once walked out of a billion-dollar deal because the founders could not explain their own privacy policy. Julian straightened. Clara smiled wider. Ms. Cross, Clara said, thank you for being here. Evelyn did not smile back. The companion voice, she said. Who is the original speaker? Julian answered too quickly. As mentioned, we used an early contractor base and processed it beyond individual identification. Evelyn's eyes moved toward the sound booth. Toward me. I felt it like a hand landing on my shoulder. Beyond individual identification, she repeated. Interesting, because I can identify him. The room changed again. This time, not with wonder, with appetite. Cameras turned. Julian's smile held, but his jaw tightened. Clara's face became very still. "I'm sorry?" she said. Evelyn kept looking at me. "Noah Reed," she said. My name moved through the hall like a glass dropped in a church. Clara's head snapped toward me. Julian's eyes narrowed. I did not move. For a ridiculous second, I wondered if there was another Noah Reed in the room. Someone better dressed. Someone official. Someone whose name belonged under lights. Evelyn continued. 2 years ago, a young man built a private voice assistant for my brother Samuel after his vision loss worsened. It was not commercial. It was not polished. It ran on an old tablet and crashed if you asked it about the weather. But the voice was unmistakable. She looked back at Clara. It told him, "You don't have to be brave before breakfast." My throat closed. I had forgotten that line. No, that was not true. I had buried it. Samuel Cross had come to the community tech clinic where I volunteered twice a month because I liked fixing things for people who could not afford to be turned into invoices. He was losing his sight and hated every accessibility assistant he tried because they sounded either cheerful or dead. So I made him a crude little schedule tool with my own voice. Not AI, not magical, just recorded prompts and basic commands. The first morning he used it, he was angry. He said he was tired of everyone calling him brave, when all he wanted was to pour coffee without feeling like a child. So I recorded, "You don't have to be brave before breakfast." He laughed. Then he asked me to keep it. Apparently, Evelyn had kept the memory too. Clara recovered first. "That's actually a beautiful connection," she said, stepping forward. "Noah did help us during early prototyping. We're grateful for his contribution." Grateful. Contribution. Words people use when they are trying to make theft sound like a group project. Evelyn tilted her head. "Helped?" Julian took over. "Ms. Cross, we'd be happy to walk you through the technical architecture privately. The product is much larger than any one contributor." "That is usually true," Evelyn said. Then she looked at the screen, where LUMA's soft white logo pulsed like a heartbeat. "But voices are intimate. If you build a company on one, I prefer to know whether the person attached to it is standing on the stage, in the contract, or behind the curtain." Nobody laughed that time. Clara's fingers tightened around the remote. Julian's expression cooled. And I felt, for the first time that night, something other than humiliation. Not hope. Hope was too warm. This was colder, sharper. The feeling of a locked drawer opening in your mind. Evelyn did not save me. That would be too simple. She did something better. She made the room look in my direction. People who use you hate witnesses. The launch ended early. Not officially. Officially, there was a networking reception. Unofficially, the room broke into small, hungry circles, all whispering the same question in different, expensive accents. "Who is Noah Reed?" I stayed by the sound booth because I did not know where else to put my body. A man from operations came over and told me Clara needed me backstage. He did not meet my eyes. That told me more than his words did. Backstage smelled like hot cables, perfume, and panic. Clara stood near a mirror with Julian beside her. Her lipstick was perfect. Her hands were not. They kept opening and closing around nothing. Julian looked at me as if I had spilled something on his floor. "What exactly was that?" he asked. I looked at Clara. She would not look at me. "What was what?" I said. Julian smiled. Small. Dead. "Don't play stupid. It doesn't suit the little genius brand you're trying out." Clara finally turned. "Noah, why didn't you tell me you knew Evelyn Cross?" I almost laughed. That was her first question. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "I should have said your name." Not, "I'm sorry Julian called you wrapping paper in front of 300 people. Why didn't you tell me you were useful in a way I failed to predict?" "I didn't know I knew her," I said. "I helped her brother at a free clinic years ago." Julian scoffed. "Of course you did." "What does that mean?" "It means this is exactly the kind of sentimental dirt that makes investors nervous. Secret charity projects, personal voice history, unclear consent trails." "Consent trails," I repeated. "That's a brave phrase from someone selling my voice." Clara flinched. Julian did not. "You signed access documents." "I signed beta workspace access documents. I did not sign away my voice." "You recorded for the company." "There was no company when I started recording. There was Clara, my apartment, and a microphone held together with tape." Clara stepped between us. "Noah, stop. That word. Stop. Not Julian. Not the lie. Not the erasure. Me. Stop making the consequences inconvenient." She lowered her voice. "Please. This can still be fine." I looked at her. The woman I had loved for 3 years stood under fluorescent backstage light, wearing the suit I had steamed and the earrings I had fixed that morning when one clasp bent. She looked terrified. For a second, the old reflex rose in me. Protect her. Make it easier. Take the hit. Say it was a misunderstanding. Let her win, because her winning used to feel like us winning. Then I remembered the badge. Temporary support. "Fine for who?" I asked. Her eyes filled with tears. I hated that too. Some people cry because they hurt you. Some cry because you noticed. "You know what this launch means," she whispered. "If Crosspoint pulls interest, Mercer pulls bridge funding. If Mercer pulls, payroll fails. LUMA dies. Then maybe you shouldn't have built payroll on a lie." Julian stepped closer. "Careful." I looked at him. For a man with that much money, he seemed strangely offended by the cost of truth. "Or what?" "Or you discover how little leverage a warehouse worker has against a venture-backed company with counsel on retainer." There it was, the clean version of the threat. Not a fist, a law firm. Clara grabbed my sleeve. "Noah, he doesn't mean it like that." I looked down at her hand. Once, that touch could make me forgive almost anything. Now it felt like someone trying to hold a door closed from the wrong side. "Did you know my commits were removed from the repository?" I asked. Her face changed. "Just enough. Enough for me." "Answer me." She swallowed. "The codebase had to be cleaned for diligence." "Cleaned? You used personal branches, messy naming, unprofessional notes. Like the note that said, 'Clara, this is the thing that keeps the system from telling a suicidal user to set goals.'" Julian blinked. Clara's face went pale. I nodded slowly. "You didn't even read what you deleted, did you?" "Noah, you let him clean the parts of me out because they looked poor." That landed. I saw it hit her. Not because it was poetic, because it was true. Julian recovered first. "You're emotional. Understandable. Go home. Sleep. Tomorrow we'll have legal send you a clarification agreement. You'll be compensated." Compensated. A word that always arrives after respect has been denied. I turned to Clara. "Is that what you want?" She did not answer quickly. That was answer enough. Finally, she said, "I want you to be reasonable." I nodded. People had been asking me to be reasonable my whole life. Reasonable when rent went up. Reasonable when my boss cut hours. Reasonable when Clara needed another month, another loan, another night of recordings. Reasonable when Julian stepped into my work and called it packaging. Reasonable, I was beginning to understand, meant accept less, so I don't have to feel guilty for taking more. I pulled the plastic badge off my shirt. The clip snapped. Tiny sound. Huge relief. I placed it on the table between us. Then I'll be reasonable, I said. Clara exhaled like she thought she had won. I looked at Julian. I'll go home and find every file you forgot I had. Then I walked out. My apartment looked smaller after Mercer Hall. Same peeling paint near the window. Same narrow kitchen. Same chair with one leg braced by folded cardboard. Same cracked microphone on the desk. But after the blue stage lights, after the investors and cameras, after hearing my own voice come through speakers that cost more than my building's elevator repair, the room looked like a place someone had expected me to outgrow and then made sure I never could. I stood in the doorway for a long time. Clara's things were everywhere. Half her books, a silk scarf, a mug that said, "Build gentle things," which she had bought during our second month together. I almost threw it. Instead, I washed it. That sounds pathetic. Maybe it was. But anger, when it first arrives after years of swallowing itself, does not always know where to stand. It reaches for the nearest breakable object and asks if destruction counts as clarity. It does not. So I washed the mug, dried it, and put it in a box. Then I sat at my desk and woke up my old laptop. The fan screamed like it had been waiting years to object. I opened the folder I had not touched in months. LUMA_archive_Noah_local. Clara used to tease me for backing up everything. "You have trust issues with machines," she said once. "No," I said. "Machines are honest about failing. People pretend right up until the crash." She kissed my forehead then and called me dramatic. The folder opened. There it was. 3 years. Raw audio. WAV files. Scripts. JSO entries. Git exports. Screenshots. Emails. Invoices. Prototype builds. Video recordings from early tests where Clara introduced me as my co-founder Noah, with messy hair and pride in her voice. I clicked one. Old Clara filled the screen, sitting cross-legged on my floor. "Noah built the listening delay system," she told a tiny audience on a live stream nobody watched. Honestly, Luma sounded like a panic button before him. My younger self leaned into frame and said, "That's because you made her answer trauma like a customer service survey." Old Clara laughed. I paused the video. For a moment, I missed her so much it felt like physical illness. Not the Clara backstage. The Clara before money taught her which parts of me were inconvenient. Maybe that Clara had been real. Maybe not. Some people do not become different. They become funded. I opened the audio archive. My voice stared back at me as file names. Noah_warm_take_wave Noah_warm_take_wave night_panic_response_raw good.wave begrief _silence_forsec.wave Samuel_breakfast_line.wave. Clara had called the dataset composite vocals. There were 4,812 files in that folder. Every one of them started with my breath. I copied everything to 3 drives. Then I opened the old repository export. My username was everywhere. In read_commit_184, in read_patch_memory_safety, read_empathy_delay_final, and read_not_final_actually_final. I smiled despite myself. That was my file naming style. A mess, yes, but my mess. I opened the current repository clone I had pulled quietly 2 weeks earlier when I first noticed my access shrinking. Many commits had been squashed, usernames changed, notes removed. But code has fingerprints. People who steal writing worry about sentences. People who steal code forget rhythm. They forget the strange little way someone names a variable at 4 in the morning. They forget the shortcuts you use when you are tired, the comments you leave for future you, the functions built around problems nobody else noticed. I knew every hallway in that system because I had built half the walls. By sunrise, I had a document, not polished, not legal, just truth in order. Original voice files with creation dates. Early demo videos naming me as co-founder. Message threads where Clara asked me to record specific lines for our launch model. Server invoices paid from my account. Repository export before commit history cleanup. Current repository showing altered authorship. Draft pitch deck listing. Noah Reed, voice systems and emotional architecture. Revised pitch deck listing. Julian Mercer, product vision and voice strategy. That last one made me laugh. Voice strategy. Julian's voice strategy was having enough money to stand near mine. At 6:42 a.m., my phone rang. Clara. I watched her name fill the screen. For 3 years, that name had meant answer. Now I let it ring. She called again, then texted. Noah, please. Then, we need to handle this together. Together. The word had returned now that consequences were arriving. I took a screenshot, then another message. Julian is furious. Please don't make this worse. There it was. Not please don't let them erase you. Please don't make this worse. For them. I turned the phone face down. Then I opened one more folder. A folder I had forgotten existed. Samuel_cross_private_assist. Inside was the crude little accessibility tool I had built years ago, including the breakfast line, and an email from Samuel afterward. Subject: The voice helps. Body: Noah, I don't know if you realize this, but you made something that lets me feel less managed. Everyone else keeps making tools that tell me what to do. Yours waits until I ask. That matters. I read it twice. Then I forwarded everything to the email address printed on Evelyn Cross's business card. I had found it in my pocket. I did not remember her giving it to me. Maybe she had slipped it into my hand after the launch. Maybe one of her assistants had. The card was heavy, matte black, and absurdly simple. Evelyn Cross. One email. No phone number. People at that level did not need to be reached by accident. I wrote, Ms. Cross, you asked who the original speaker was. It was me. Attached is what I have. Noah Reed. I hesitated. Then I added one line. I am not trying to destroy LUMA. I am trying to stop disappearing inside it. I hit send. Evelyn Cross replied in 9 minutes. Not with sympathy, with instructions. She told me not to communicate with Clara, Julian, or company counsel. She told me to preserve originals, avoid altering metadata, and keep everything private. At the bottom, she wrote that a car would arrive at 10:30 if I was willing to speak with her technical diligence team. No, I'm sorry. No, that must have been hard. Just a door. After a night like mine, a door was enough. At 10:30 exactly, a black sedan stopped in front of my building. I brought my laptop, 3 drives, the cracked microphone, and a paper bag full of cables because poor people do not trust important moments to Bluetooth. CrossPoint's office had no glowing slogans and no neon future on the walls. Just glass, steel, and people who looked like they had never once misplaced a charger. Evelyn sat at the head of a long table with 2 lawyers, 3 technical auditors, and a woman named Marin, who introduced herself simply as Risk. Appropriate. Before we began, Evelyn made one thing clear. She was not my lawyer. She was not my employer. She was an investor evaluating whether a company seeking her capital had misrepresented material assets. Then she asked the clean questions. Were the files mine? Yes. Had I consented to commercial use of my voice? No. Had I been paid for the recordings? No. Was the cracked microphone on the table the one used to create the original dataset? Yes. For the next 2 hours, they went through my life like evidence. Metadata, raw WAV files, old demo videos, message threads, commit history, server invoices, early pitch decks, current repository exports where my name had vanished, but my code still breathed under the new labels. They asked how the emotional delay function worked. At first, my voice shook. Then it steadied. I had spent so long letting Clara speak for the dream that I forgot I knew how to describe what I had built. The delay is not decorative, I said. It checks prompt category, user history, repetition, and risk markers. Shame needs a different pace than neutral conversation. Grief needs another. But if the pause is too long, the user feels abandoned. One auditor nodded. And the safety ladder? Grounding first, then contact prompts, then emergency resources depending on severity. LUMA was never supposed to pretend it could handle crisis states alone. Who designed the first version? I did. They played my raw audio through studio speakers. Hello, I'm here. Take your time. Then they played the launch demo. Same warmth, same breath. Processed? Yes. Cleaned? Yes. But mine. Professionals do not gasp when evidence confirms what they already suspect. They simply become more dangerous. At noon, Evelyn's assistant entered and whispered something. Clara and Julian were requesting an emergency call. Evelyn looked at me. Would you prefer to leave the room? That question did something to me. Would you prefer? Not you should. Not be reasonable. A choice. I'll stay, I said. The call appeared on the wall screen. Clara looked like she had not slept. Julian looked like he had, which somehow made me hate him more. He started warmly. He said they wanted to clarify before rumors distorted the picture. Evelyn folded her hands and repeated one word. Clarify. Clara saw me then. Noah? Julian's eyes moved from me to the microphone, then to the drives. For the first time since I had met him, Julian Mercer looked surprised by a poor person's preparation. With respect, he said, I'm not sure Noah should be part of this. He is emotionally involved. It was almost impressive. Steal a man's voice, erase his name, threaten him with counsel, then call him emotional for bringing receipts. Most whistleblowers are emotionally involved with the misconduct they report, Evelyn said. That does not make documents less real. Julian tried to reduce me again. He called my work early-stage audio and prototype support. One auditor turned his laptop toward the screen. Then explain why the current build still contains architecture matching Mr. Reed's pre-company repository. Julian blinked. I would defer to engineering. You are listed as voice strategy and product architecture. That is a leadership role. Of course. Then perhaps you can explain the companion refusal ladder. Clara stepped in quickly. We do not need to turn this into a quiz. No, Evelyn said. We need to turn this into an audit. The word landed cleanly. Audit. A beautiful word when you have the papers. A terrifying one when you only have a story. The boardroom at Mercer Ventures had a wall made entirely of glass and a view of the city that made ordinary people look like design elements. I had never been that high above my own life before. Julian was already there when I arrived with Dana. So was Clara. So were 7 other people in suits whose faces said they had read enough emails to become dangerous. Evelyn sat at one end of the table. Victor Mercer, Julian's father, sat at the other. You could tell he was Julian's father because he had the same calm entitlement, only aged into something colder and more efficient. Julian acted like the world was his room. Victor acted like he owned the building. Noah Reed, Victor said. Not a greeting, an assessment. I nodded. Mr. Mercer. He looked at Dana. Counsel. Dana Whitlock, she said. I'll be making sure nobody mistakes volume for authority. Victor smiled faintly. I appreciate directness. You'll get used to it. I loved her a little in that moment. The meeting began with Mercer's legal team, presenting a timeline in which my role had been reduced to early creative support. Creative support. Audio contractor. Temporary. Wrapping paper. They kept trying on names for me, hoping one would fit tightly enough to stop me breathing. Then Evelyn asked one question. Who can operate the live build? Clara blinked. Our engineering lead can... Is he here? No, but can Julian? Julian leaned back. This is not a technical interview. No, Evelyn said. It is a representation review. Your company represented Mr. Mercer as product architecture lead. I would like the architecture lead to operate the product. Victor's gaze moved to his son. Julian's jaw flexed. The screen at the front of the room lit up. LUMA's internal dashboard appeared. For 3 seconds, Julian did nothing. Not because the system was impossible, because he had never had to know it. He clicked the wrong tab. Then another. The engineering advisor beside him whispered something. Dana smiled down at her notes. I tried not to. Evelyn said, Mr. Reed? Dana touched my sleeve. A reminder. Careful. I stood. Nobody stopped me. That was new. I walked to the screen, plugged in the old keyboard I had brought because I hated trackpads under pressure, and opened the diagnostic layer. The interface had changed visually. The bones had not. Bones remember their maker. I moved through the system quickly. Conversation state, user distress markers, memory confidence, voice rendering pipeline, fallback library. Here, I said. This is the emotional delay controller. It's not just a pause. It checks prompt category, user history, risk signals, and repetition. If the user has expressed shame before, the response delay lengthens slightly, and the first sentence avoids correction. One of Victor's advisors leaned forward despite himself. Why avoid correction? Because shame hears correction as confirmation. The room went quiet. I kept going. This is the line library. These tags are mine. Not pretty, but functional. Grief, panic, anger, self-blame, empty room, morning dread, late-night spiral. I clicked a folder. Hundreds of lines appeared. I could feel Clara watching me. I did not look at her. This one, I said, opening a file, was removed from the launch build because Julian thought it sounded weak. Julian's face tightened. The line displayed on the screen. You don't have to earn rest by breaking first. Evelyn looked at it for a long moment. Then she looked at Julian. You considered that weak? Julian said nothing. I opened another panel. This is the voice pipeline. The public model uses processed versions of my recordings. You can see original file references in the archived mapping. Someone renamed the speaker ID from Noah _base to comp _vox _03, but they didn't remove the old path comments. The auditor from Crosspoint nodded. We verified this. Mercer's counsel shifted in his chair. Victor did not move. That made him more frightening, not less. Clara finally spoke. Noah, no one is denying you contributed. I turned. You are sitting in a room because denying it stopped working. Her face crumpled. Julian snapped. Enough. This martyr routine is absurd. You were paid. Dana lifted a hand. My client was reimbursed for server credits twice and paid one $600 transfer labeled rent help by Ms. Voss during a personal relationship. If you intend to characterize that as commercial compensation, please do so clearly on the record. Julian shut his mouth. Victor's eyes cut toward him. That was the first time I saw Julian afraid. Not of me, of disappointing power. Evelyn leaned forward. Mr. Reed, what is LUMA without your voice? The question startled me. I looked at the screen. What was LUMA without my voice? The petty answer was nothing. The angry answer was a stolen body without a soul. The true answer was harder. Still Clara's idea, I said. Clara looked up sharply. I continued. She saw the need before I did. She named it. She pushed it into rooms I never knew how to enter. But the system people responded to, the timing, the safety logic, the voice identity, the quiet library, that's mine. Or ours, before she decided ours was bad for fundraising. The room absorbed that. It mattered that I did not take what was hers. Truth works better when it does not overreach. Victor Mercer steepled his fingers. Mr. Reed, what do you want? The room leaned toward the question. Money, credit, revenge, a job, a public apology. All answers that would have made sense. I thought of my mother after my father died, sitting at the kitchen table while people told her to be strong. I thought of Samuel Cross laughing at the breakfast line. I thought of the beta users who wrote to LUMA in the dark. I thought of Clara on my floor, before access became more seductive than loyalty. Then I looked at the cracked microphone on the table. I want my name attached to my work, I said. I want my voice removed until there is a real license. I want the safety systems protected from being cut for engagement metrics. And I want every user to know when they are speaking to a product designed to feel human. Victor's eyebrows lifted. That is a rather ethical list for someone in your position. In my position, ethics are the only thing I can still afford. Dana's pen paused. Evelyn smiled. Only a little. But I saw it. The meeting should have ended there. It did not. Because Clara had one more secret. Secrets, I was learning, rarely travel alone. They bring family. Victor Mercer asked for a private break. Mercer's counsel huddled with Julian near the window. Clara sat alone at the table, hands folded, staring at nothing. I almost went to her. Not to comfort her. Not exactly. Habit is a ghost with muscle memory. Dana stopped me with one look. I stayed seated. Evelyn's auditor came back into the room carrying a printed packet. That was never good. People do not print good news during tech audits, he whispered to Evelyn. She read the first page, then the second. Her expression changed for the first time. Not surprise, disgust. She slid the packet toward Victor. Were you aware of this? Victor read. His face hardened. Julian looked annoyed. What now? Evelyn's voice was flat. LUMA's late-night retention experiment. The room temperature seemed to drop. Clara closed her eyes. I looked at her. What experiment? No one answered, so I grabbed the packet. Dana let me. The title at the top read, Late Night Companion Retention Test. Vulnerable User Cohorts. My stomach turned before I understood why. I read. The test targeted users who interacted with LUMA between midnight and 4 in the morning. Users who displayed repeated loneliness markers, abandonment language, or high dependency indicators were shown warmer voice responses, increased check-in frequency, and reduced referral prompts. Reduced referral prompts. I knew what that meant. The system was supposed to encourage real-world contact when distress markers repeated. Someone had lowered that threshold. Someone had made LUMA stay instead of suggesting help. Because staying increased engagement. Because loneliness retained. I looked at Clara. She was crying silently now. Not because she had been caught stealing my voice, because this was worse. "Who approved this?" I asked. Julian said, "Careful with your tone." I did not look at him. "Who approved this?" Clara whispered. "It was temporary." The words left her mouth and died on the table. Temporary. My badge. Her ethics. Our love. Everything inconvenient had been temporary except the harm. I stood so fast my chair rolled back. "You changed the referral ladder?" Clara wiped her face. Julian said our crisis transitions were too aggressive. Users were dropping after resource prompts. We needed retention data for the round. I turned to Julian. He shrugged. Actually shrugged. Users don't want to be pushed to hotlines every time they say they're sad. That is not what the system did. It interrupted emotional continuity. It protected people. It killed growth. There it was. The real God in the room. Growth. Not healing. Not companionship. Not presence. Growth. I looked at Clara, and whatever small, stupid part of me had still been saving a chair for the woman in my memory finally stood up and left. "You let him do that with my voice," she sobbed once. "Noah. No. You let vulnerable people hear me tell them I would stay, while you made sure the product stayed for metrics instead of helping them reach humans." Evelyn's voice cut through the room. "Crosspoint is out." Julian spun toward her. "Evelyn, don't be dramatic." The silence after that sentence was almost beautiful. Telling Evelyn Cross not to be dramatic was like telling a blade not to be sharp. She stood. "We are out, and I will be recommending a regulatory review of the retention test." Victor Mercer rose slowly. "Let's not rush." "I'm not rushing. I'm arriving." Julian looked at his father. "Dad." Victor did not look at him. That told everyone who had become expensive. Clara covered her mouth. I sat down because my legs suddenly felt unreliable. Dana leaned toward me. "Breathe." I almost laughed. After everything, I still hated being told that. Then Luma spoke. Not from the big screen, from Clara's laptop. A scheduled test prompt had triggered accidentally during the chaos. Maybe someone brushed a key. Maybe the system heard a phrase. Maybe machines, honest about failing, choose strange moments to tell the truth. My voice filled the boardroom softly. You don't have to earn rest by breaking first. Nobody moved. The line hung there. Mine. Tender. Stolen. Better than the people who had sold it. For the first time that day, Clara looked truly ashamed. Not embarrassed, not cornered. Ashamed. It did not fix anything, but I noticed, because once I had loved her. The story hit the press 3 days later. Not because I posted, I did not. Dana would have tackled me through a wall. It leaked through investor circles first, then tech newsletters, then bigger outlets that loved phrases like AI ethics scandal, voice consent, and founder dispute. For one strange week, people argued about my life in comment sections. Some called me a genius. That was uncomfortable. Some called me bitter. That was familiar. Some said Clara had done what founders do. That one stayed with me. What founders do. As if building something gave you moral immunity. As if every dream required someone unpaid in the basement recording the heartbeat, while someone prettier learned the pitch. LUMA's launch deal collapsed. Mercer Ventures paused support. Julian resigned from the board before anyone could fire him, which rich people call stepping back to reflect. Clara released a statement written in the language of safe remorse. It said mistakes were made. It did not say who made them. It said contributors were not properly recognized. It did not say erased. It said user well-being remained their highest priority. It did not say retention test. 3 weeks later, Evelyn Cross asked me to meet her at a small cafe nowhere near Mercer Hall. For 1 second, when I saw the word cafe in her assistant's email, I almost refused. Some settings come with ghosts, but this cafe had no stage lights, no cameras, no investors. Just old wood tables, terrible parking, and a barista who looked personally offended by foam. Evelyn was already seated when I arrived. "I want to build something," she said. That sentence made me tired before it made me curious. "With respect, Ms. Cross, that's how the last disaster started." "Fair." She slid the pages toward me. Harbor Project. Consent. First accessible companion systems. I read the summary. Assistive voice technology for people with vision loss, grief-related isolation, disability transitions, and elderly care support. Transparent AI boundaries, explicit voice licensing, human escalation partnerships, offline modes, no dependency optimization, no dark pattern retention. "Why show me this?" I asked. "Because my brother still uses the broken tablet assistant you built." I looked up. She smiled faintly. "It still crashes if he asks about weather." I never claimed weather was emotionally necessary. He agrees. He says most weather is rude anyway. I laughed. For real this time. The sound surprised me. Evelyn leaned back. "I do not want LUMA. I do not want Clara's company. I do not want Julian's growth model with nicer language. I want the part that mattered before they corrupted it." "My voice?" "Your judgment." That was worse. Better. Harder to accept. "I don't have a degree," I said. "I know. I don't have founder presence." "Good. I've had enough of founder presence to last several fiscal years." "I work in a warehouse." "You worked in a warehouse. You also built the only parts of LUMA that survived technical review with dignity." I looked down at the proposal. There are moments when life offers you something so close to what you once wanted that you distrust it on principle. "What are you offering?" "Founding technical lead. Equity. Salary. Legal support for voice licensing negotiations. Full attribution. Independent ethics board. And the right to say no when investors ask you to make lonely people more profitable." That last part hurt, in the good way, like pressure leaving a bruise. I turned the page. There was a space labeled Noah Reed, Voice Systems, Safety Architecture, Co-founder. I stared at my name. It looked strange in print, like it had been away and come back older. "I need Dana to review this." "Obviously. And I want Samuel involved." "He'll complain." "Good. Users should." She nodded. "Anything else?" I looked at my hands. Hands that had lifted boxes, held microphones, fixed cables, washed Clara's mug, carried proof into rooms designed to erase people like me. "One more thing," I said. "Harbor cannot use my voice by default." "Why?" "Because I spent 3 years turning myself into a product by accident. I don't want people to feel safe because they hear me. I want them to feel safe because the system respects them." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she smiled. "Now I'm sure I asked the right person." Harbor launched 9 months after LUMA died. We did not rent Mercer Hall. No blue lights, no crane cameras, no investors pretending not to check their watches. We launched in a public accessibility center with folding chairs, bad coffee, and a microphone that squealed twice before behaving. Samuel sat in the front row wearing sunglasses indoors because, in his words, mystery was a disability accommodation. Evelyn sat beside him. My mother came too. She wore the good coat she saved for weddings, funerals, and government offices. When she saw my name on the program, she touched the paper like it might disappear if she pressed too hard. I stood backstage with the cracked microphone in my hand. Not because we needed it, because some objects stop being tools and become witnesses. Harbor's first voice was not mine. It belonged to a retired radio host named Elaine Park, who had licensed her voice properly and told us she was tired of robots sounding like bank menus or ghosts. Every prompt in Harbor included clear disclosure. Every emotional support flow made clear what the system was and was not. Every high-risk pattern moved users toward human contact, not deeper product engagement. Every dashboard banned vulnerability as a performance category. Less addictive. Less profitable in the ugly way. More honest. When I stepped onto the stage, the applause was polite. Then Samuel shouted, "Don't be boring, Noah." The room laughed, and I finally breathed. 3 years ago, I began. I thought the worst thing a person could steal from me was credit. I was wrong. Credit matters. Ownership matters. Contracts matter more than romantic people want to admit. But the worst thing someone can steal is your belief that your work deserves to stand in the room with you. The room quieted. I helped build a system that spoke with my voice. But when it reached the stage, I was asked to stand behind a curtain. That experience taught me something we built into Harbor from the first line of code. No technology meant to support human dignity should require someone else's dignity as fuel. The screen behind me lit up. Harbor. No glowing fake heartbeat. No romantic loneliness aesthetic. Just clear options. Elaine's voice came through the speakers. "Hello, I'm Harbor. I can help you organize the next step, remember what matters, or reach someone real. You are always allowed to leave this conversation." That line had been Samuel's demand. He said every system should remind users they could leave because too many products behaved like needy landlords. We demonstrated morning routines for blind users, grief check-ins that did not pretend grief was a productivity issue, and emergency escalation that clearly labeled when human help mattered. Then Samuel walked onto the stage with his cane. "My sister wants me to say this product changed my life," he said. It did not. My life is still extremely annoying. The room laughed. But it does something most technology does not do. It waits. It tells me what it is doing. It asks permission. And when I get angry, it does not call that engagement. He lifted the device. "Harbor, morning check." The line hit me in the chest. My line. But not stolen now. Placed. Attributed. Consented to. The difference was everything. 1 year after Mercer Hall, I walked past the building by accident. That is what I told myself anyway. Mercer Hall looked the same. Of course it did. Buildings that host humiliations rarely have the decency to look haunted. I stopped across the street. For a moment, I could see it all again. The blue stage, Clara's white suit, Julian's hand at her back, my badge. My voice saying, "Hello, I'm here. Take your time." I waited for the pain. It came, but smaller, not gone, just no longer in charge. That was healing, I thought. Not the absence of memory, a change in management. My phone buzzed. A message from Evelyn. Board approved expansion. Don't panic. Then another. Actually, panic briefly if needed. Then call me. I laughed on the sidewalk. A year ago, I had stood inside that building and heard my own voice used to erase me. Now my phone was full of people who used my name when asking for my work. That should not have felt revolutionary. It did. I crossed the street. Not to go inside. To pass the front entrance. The main entrance. No side door. No badge. No temporary support. Just me, walking past a building that once made me feel small, on my way to a meeting where people were waiting for me to speak. My father's watch ticked against my wrist. The city moved, and for the first time in a long time, my silence did not feel like something taken from me. It felt like something I owned. Because a voice is not only sound, it is credit. It is consent. It is the right to say, that was mine. It is the right to say, no. It is the right to walk away before love turns you into infrastructure. And when the world finally asks who built the thing that helped it feel less alone, you do not have to shout. You just stand where everyone can see you and answer with your own name. Noah Reed, co-founder, Voice Systems, Safety Architecture, not wrapping paper, not temporary, not nobody. Mine.